spiritual food for thought.
Welcome back to Spiritual Food for Thought. I thank you for joining me once again. In this episode, we're going to talk about rejecting the conclusion of the matter. Now, from the get-go, when I say rejecting the conclusion of the matter, many of you guys may think about the end of Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, it says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." And of course, that's true. That is very true, and I believe that wholeheartedly. But there's also many times in Scripture where we see things laid out. Maybe it's a parable, maybe it's a vision, something is happening, and it's kind of confusing until we hear the conclusion of the matter. And even after hearing the conclusion of the matter, what I find is that a lot of people in the modern institutional church reject the conclusion of the matter and conclude something completely different than what God was trying to reveal and show us in the text and in the situation. First of all, in the situation for those who were there at the time, and in the text for those of us who would live later. So I'm going to grab an excerpt here from Acts chapter 10. Read the whole thing in context, but what I want you to see here is that there is a confusing vision. It's confusing to read in the context of the whole Bible after what God says is true and good and what he says is an abomination and what we shouldn't do. It becomes confusing. That's why Peter was confused. But there is a conclusion to the matter which should bring clarity to it. And if we apply the conclusion of the matter to the vision, we can reach a fullness of it. Unfortunately, the modern church rejects the conclusion of the matter because they have their own agenda and they want to push a different narrative. Let's read. I'll be starting at verse 9. "On the morrow, as they went their way and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up on the housetop and prayed about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet, knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. And Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call thou not common. This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. And while Peter doubted in himself what the vision that he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. And while Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he who ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come? And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by a holy angel to send for thee to this house, and to hear the words of thee. Then called he them in, and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And on the morrow, after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and had called together his kinsmen and near friends. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him, and fell down at his feet, and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation, but God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So first of all, we know that in the testimony and the life and the ministry of Jesus Christ, the Jews of the day, the Judaism, the religion of Judaism, was at odds with the Old Testament commandments of God. They added many traditions and doctrines and commandments which made the law of God of none effect. Here, he says, it's unlawful for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. According to who? Judaism. You're not going to find the Old Testament commandment from God that would say so. So Peter, as he's trying to discern how to accurately follow God and how to accurately follow our Messiah, he had some hang-ups from Judaism. But God used a vision to show him something. What was the conclusion of the matter? That God showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Any what? Any man. You see, this vision happened 3 times. Because Peter was hungry, God used food to get his attention. But in allowing these animals to come down, it was not actually about the food. This happened 3 times, and he says, what God has cleansed, this voice, call not thou common. It doesn't say call not thou unclean. This isn't talking about clean and unclean animals. This is talking about men. That's why Peter doubted in himself. But then just like this sheep fell 3 times, 3 men show up. And the conclusion of the matter is not to call any man common or unclean. And I would even drive the point home a little more and saying that we don't need to keep the Jewish laws of Judaism. The Old Testament laws were not for the Jews. They were for anyone who wanted to be a believer, the entire nation of Israel, whether native born or a stranger who sojourned among them, not just the Jews, one of the 12 tribes. And Judaism has done many other things in adding to and taking away from the law of God. We don't need to follow Judaism, and we don't need to call men common or unclean. That's the conclusion of the matter here. I know a lot of people in the modern church try to make this about food, and they have a large pile of proof texts that they try to use, but this one fails. And why does this fail as the proof text? Because it's not about food. How do we know that? Because there's a conclusion of the matter. And if we do not reject the conclusion of the matter, then we can see what it's actually talking about. To reject the conclusion of the matter is to say, oh, well, Peter got the wrong interpretation of this vision. He should have been following Judaism. He shouldn't have went under these men. He should have just eat pigs or something instead. It's not what this was about. And to say so is to say that this interpretation is wrong, this passage in Acts is wrong, maybe the entire book of Acts is wrong because your pastor wants to teach a different doctrine than what we find in Scripture. That's dangerous. Peter was not in error for only eating clean animals. That's what they were provided for. Before Mount Sinai, during Mount Sinai, and afterwards. And it's amazing too, because some of the commentaries are going to point back to some passages from the lifetime of Jesus Christ. This is after his death, burial, and resurrection, but they're going to point back to some passages which also have a conclusion to that matter. And we'll look into those next time. But the takeaway for today is that if there is a conclusion to the matter, if there's something like a vision or a parable that's somewhat confusing, and then an explanation of it is given, stick with the explanation that God reveals in Scripture. Don't reject the conclusion of the matter to come up with some other idea. That's foolish and erroneous. Be blessed.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.